Hi everyone and welcome. Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue. My name is Emmanuel Coppinger and I'm the Women in AI Ambassador for Canada. I hope you've enjoyed the informative and inspiring content so far. For those of you who are attending this first panel of the day, can I ask all the speakers to mute themselves for the intro? I'm so sorry. A lot of background noise. Thank you so much, ladies. So for those of you who are attending their first panel of the day, it's my honor and privilege to welcome you to the first Women in AI Global Summit and to Canada's session, showcasing Canada's strong and diverse AI ecosystem. No matter who you are, what you do, no matter where you come from or how old you are, no matter if you're already working in AI or are simply interested in knowing more, I want you to feel welcome. We want you to feel welcome. In the next 80 minutes, you'll get to meet some of the top actresses in the AI field and to know how women in AI shape AI for good, with perspective from entrepreneurship, ethical AI, finance, healthcare, and academia. But before you get to know our speakers, I'd like to take a moment to say a few words on Women in AI, WAY for short. We're non-profit and community-driven initiatives whose mission is to increase the representation and participation of women in artificial intelligence. We're already more than 4,000 members coming from 150 countries. Our core values are diversity and inclusion, responsible AI, empowerment, support, equality, care, and compassion. We operate through a network of country ambassadors responsible to build their team and grow their local communities by managing WAY activities on the ground. As the WAY ambassador for Canada, it's my real honor today to officially launch the Canadian chapter of Women in AI, proudly supported by AltaML, Next AI Montreal, operated by HEC École des Dirigeants and University of Alberta. I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank them for being visionary sponsors and embarking on Women in AI Canada's journey with us. By providing funding, they're fueling the passion of our team and will allow us to fulfill our mission throughout the year, starting with today's event. I also want to show my appreciation to our community partners, including Athena Pathways, AI in BC, University of Toronto, and many others from all over Canada who have helped us spread the word about the panel. This is only the beginning for Canada, so make sure you follow the Women in AI Canada page on LinkedIn to receive updates on our upcoming activities. This groundwork is led by a team of dedicated, kick-ass volunteers that I would like to thank also to Claire, Frincy, Justine, Marina, Senabu, and Shiamali. Thanks so much for working so hard on top of your professional lives and family duties to make the panel happen today. Resilience, passion, humility, and resourcefulness are just a few of the qualities that describe the outstanding speakers who will be, in just a few seconds, taking part in the discussion on how Canada is shaping AI for good. We're very lucky to have Alona Fyshe, AMI Fellow, Canada CIFAR AI Chair and Assistant Professor at the University of Alberta, moderating the discussion. We're so proud these AI leaders from across the country accepted our invitation to share their stories and vision. On behalf of our community, I'd like to thank Alona, Foteini, Helia, Nicole, and Valentine for taking time away from their busy professional schedule and their personal life to be with us. You're the perfect example of Canadian excellence in AI and are such an inspiration for anyone who is already working or who would like to work in the AI field in Canada. I would also like to take this opportunity to excuse Valerie Pisano for not being with us today. She was feeling sick and unwell and couldn't make it. We wish her a prompt recovery. I will leave you with a final anecdote. Something that really struck me when I interacted with the speakers in preparation of this panel is how diverse all of their backgrounds were and how random or recent their participation in the AI ecosystem could be. It reinforced my belief that AI is really not a tech trend, nor an industry in its own right. There's no doubt that the widespread adoption of AI methods and tools will have a major impact on our generation and the following ones across all industries. No matter if you have a Ph.D. or undergrad, no matter if you have a tech or a business background, no matter if you're a man or a woman, you can certainly be part of this blooming ecosystem. In the end, you just need to be an AI enthusiast. Curiosity and willingness to learn will bring you places you can't even imagine. So don't be shy and ask them questions in the chat during this session, as there will be some time for Q&A at the end of the discussion. We hope you enjoy every bit of the discussion today. Alona, thanks again for accepting to moderate the discussion. The stage is all yours.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. And I was also overjoyed to see the panel of women that are joining us today. Their backgrounds are diverse and interesting, and I think today is going to be a lot of fun. So we have with us Foteini Agrafioti, Chief Science Officer at RBC and Head of Borealis AI. Borealis AI. I always say that. An RBC research institute dedicated to advancing ethical AI capabilities. Foteini is also an inventor and TED speaker and serves as co-chair of the Government of Canada's Advisory Council on Artificial Intelligence. Welcome, Foteini. Dr. Helia Mohammadi, the National Healthcare Chief Data Scientist for Microsoft Canada. Helia has been pivotal in spearheading Canadian healthcare digital transformation and AI adoption strategy through her role with Microsoft Canada and as observing board member of the Digital Technology Supercluster. Thank you, Helia, for joining us. Nicole Janssen, co-founder and CEO of AltaML, a machine learning product company with a vision to accelerate human potential through the power of ML and a goal of impacting 1 billion decisions by 2030. Nicole is also co-founder of Jan Alta Interactive, an online media company. And last, we have Valentine Goddard, AI ethics and social impact expert, lawyer, and founder and executive director of AI Impact Alliance, an NGO that aims to facilitate ethical and responsible implementation of AI. Valerie is also an expert for the United Nations Transformative Impact of New Technologies Group. So we're so excited to have everybody with us today. And I think I'll start off with a really general question. What do you think of when you think about AI in Canada? I don't know. Does anybody want to jump in, or I can direct it at somebody?
Jump in.
Nicole? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sure. When I think of AI in Canada, I think about the people. We have some amazing work that's being done here and some amazing original people of AI, such as Hinton, Bengio, Sutton. And then when I think about the research in Canada, I think about Mila, Vector, Amy. They're all representing our world-class research at our universities. When I think about our government, I think about the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, which honestly, it's inspiring to see that the government is thinking of Canada as a whole. But then I also think about what more we could be. We have a lead in AI. We are arguably one of the top 3 in the world countries as far as AI goes. I don't want to waste it. I don't want to see us waste it. And in order to really take the opportunity to move forward, we need to be the leader in commercialization. We have the talent for it, and we have the possibility for it. And so that's what I think of when I think of AI in Canada.
Excellent, good. I'm also have been really excited to see how the government has stepped in. Yeah, Foteini?
I would echo that, and I think, Nicole, you said government, academia, industry, all coming together, knitting very nicely towards a shared goal and ambition that we have here. I think what's also interesting about our history in AI, at least the recent history, because it goes back a very long time, is how fast we came to where we are in the last 5 years or so. Because if I go back just 5 years and I looked around, I would see pretty much of I wouldn't want to call it dead landscape, but it was a place where people would do interesting research, graduate with their PhDs, and the norm would be for them to leave Canada, move either south of the border or over to Europe to pursue opportunities there, commercialize their work there. And it felt like such a missed opportunity for this country as well, knowing that it's not just high tech that could leverage AI, but all of the Canadian industry really any business that is driven by data should be using this technology, but our experts were leaving. And so I'm very proud of how fast we came together from these three sectors: academia, government, industry, how people really shared that goal of creating this as a destination for people to want to come here, to feel like there's no better place to be, where you can do top science, publish top papers, but also a very vibrant industrial ecosystem where you can work for either local companies or international companies right here on Canadian soil. This was just not there 5 years ago. It's just very new to us. And I'm really very proud for how fast we did this.
Helia, do you want to add anything?
To go, or I could. I'm just afraid to, because I agree with everything that was said so far. We have achieved so much, and we have so much potential. But I'm afraid to start diving in too quickly, perhaps into the huge unexplored potential of civil society organizations, community-based organizations, where there's an immense digital gap. There's a huge sector in society that does not have access to AI, does not have access to collecting data to be able to understand, does not know what to do with AI. So maybe I'll keep the rest of my answer for later, but yes, we have a lot of potential, but I really employ on a regular basis the governments to address that digital gap with more proactive measures.
And I'd like to add to the vast opportunities. So we have great funding resources and grants that researchers can leverage. We also have, the great level of research collaborations that's taking place, not only among the same fields and the same teams, but also interdisciplinary. And also the AI startups that are shaping here in Canada. So it's not just those leading AI clusters here in Canada, like Emmy and Mila and Vector, but it's many more. As for example, Toronto here has the highest congestion of researchers and companies investing in AI.
Yeah, great. That's really exciting. And I want to say that although there's been a lot of change in the last 5 years, I think it's also important to note that there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in the decades leading up to that. And of course, supporting fundamental research is the sort of thing that leads to those big explosions. Is there anything, I'd like to talk a little bit about what gets you excited about AI and what are the current trends or developments that you've seen recently that get you excited about AI, not just in Canada, but on a global scale?
I can take that. So for decades, data scientists and researchers have been trying to recreate the thinking process of human experts, or in general, human cognitive abilities. And today we have reached a point we call an API and leverage pre-built AI cognitive services to include intelligence to our applications in a matter of minutes or hours. So it's really under our fingertips. And we have not only been able to augment human brain capabilities like vision, language, search, but we are now also advancing in fields like genomics research and precision medicine. This is really what excites me, that today we are now capable of designing personalized care and simulate multiple drug combination response to certain disease like cancer through AI algorithms.
One of the things that really excites me is all of the potential for what all of these solutions can lead to for improving our entire world. I wanted to talk about just one small example of something that we've done as a company recently that, to me, when I think of that, I think about the larger picture, if that goes further and farther, and what other opportunities we take on with that, what it could mean for the world. We worked with a diagnostic imaging company when they do biopsies of colon polyps, they take sample tissue. Then the pathologist takes a look at it the next day after the sample's been taken, and many times discovers that the sample is not sufficient for diagnosis. Then they have to ask the patient to come back in, take another sample. Sometimes this is taking 2 to 3 times, and it's delaying a diagnosis by weeks. By using computer vision, we've been able to work with them to identify whether or not that tissue has the correct sample And if it doesn't, it's an immediate response. They can take a second sample or a third sample, whatever they need, so that it then goes to the pathologist ready for diagnosis. It stops wasting the time of the pathologist to simply say, this is not sufficient. And it gets that diagnosis out to the patient very quickly. So I think about that small little project and amplifying that around the world.
Foteini, do you have anything you wanted to mention?
I was thinking that I'm personally very excited both about the advancements that we see on the fundamental research side and the pursuit of intelligence, the little steps forward that we get to witness on achieving that high-level reasoning that somehow becomes more and more material as time passes. There are papers that we can read that we can get goosebumps by the things that are being described nowadays that we didn't even think were, like, it changes your thinking about the field, and that's constant. But I'm also very excited about the applications because I don't think of AI as the destination. I think AI is a tool to solve problems, and I couldn't agree more about what the exciting opportunities in healthcare. And of course, this is vital and personal for every human being out there. That's the hope. In my world, I'm very interested in how we can use AI to personalize financial services. As I started stepping into the world of banking here in Canada, I learned about the financial stress that a lot of Canadians are experiencing around their finances and their growth and sending children to school or retiring or buying a home. For a country that we're so financially stable for the most part, there's a lot of anxiety amongst our people. And I do think that financial services and machine learning have a role to play here, because if you could have theoretically an expert, an advisor sit next to every Canadian out there and guide them through this and explain how it works for people in this country, that they would feel more confident to make decisions for their financial future. And that's something we know that we couldn't scale, of course, with humans. So I'm really excited to see how we can achieve something like that by using machines. It's a very interesting world. And also when it gets to fraud and detecting malicious activity, again in financial transactions, but beyond, just the possibility that we will stop talking about fraud in terms of fraud detection rates, that's completely potentially eradicate the problem once and for all, solve identity. Like we now have the tools to push the boundaries to a level that we didn't before. So that's also giving me goosebumps.
I really like what you said about that aspect of the coronavirus pandemic that maybe people don't think about when they think about what AI can do to help, but that AI could help people solidify their financial health to help them feel more secure during the pandemic. That's really interesting. Does anybody else have any ideas or thoughts on how AI can help us during the pandemic?
Oh, during the pandemic, if it's okay, I was just looking at Brianna's question and we were thinking about what we're excited about in the use of AI.
Sure.
My initial interest was and excitement came about being able to use AI for a lot of social work and human rights type of applications. And today we're on a Canadian Women in AI panel. So I'd like to give as an example the Yukon Human Rights Commission, which developed a chatbot so that people could call that and write at any time of the day. So they developed a platform, and using the information that was coming in, sometimes during the weekend, sometimes late at night, they were able to automate and identify better, so to optimize their outcoming policies and funding allocations based on the information that they were collecting. There is also an organization in Chile, so that's not Canada, but it's an international conference. So I can't name anybody yet. They will be announcing soon, but they've done some really exciting work in paragovernmental organizations and research organizations to be able to reach citizens and hear their perspective better. So of course they use NLP to be able to analyze huge amounts of phone interviews. So it's very natural language over the phone. How do you feel about the future? What should be improved? Using NLP to be able to optimize the analysis of the results and then develop better policies and funding allocations based on civil society's perspective. So I hope that answered Brianna's question up there just a little bit. Interested in access to justice through AI. I also encourage you maybe to look at a laboratoire Cyber Justice, which is here in Montreal. It's basically an AI and law lab. And they have various applications where, for example, they're optimizing access to information around justice in Régie du Logement. Sorry, I'm forgetting what that word is in English. Housing and Tenant Board. So if you have a legal problem as a owner or a tenant, and then you can get better information. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Good. Yeah, I really like that. Thinking about how AI can be part of the conversation too, right? And participate. Yeah. Good. Does anybody want to add to that? An interesting question about the democratization of AI. And there's sort of this feeling that if the code is available, then we have democratized AI. And I think there are probably arguments against that. Does anybody want to, what else do we need to democratize AI?
Holy smokes. I just spoke a lot, but I really have to answer that question. We went across Canada last year, so I met basically a lot of artists, cultural workers, creative minds, leaders in arts administration, huge research around the potential of AI for the cultural sector, as well as risks as perceived or real. And of course, it's impossible to do that kind of research and not put your both feet into the whole issue of digital gap and how the digital gap itself is connected to poverty issues and gender gap issues and gender poverty issues. So I just had to, so I've published various recommendations that I can put the links to in the chat, so I don't take up too much time around that issue, but I think it's extremely important to address as soon as possible. So be it.
I think open source is part of it, but it's not even half the equation, in my opinion. We should almost take that for granted. Right? Like we should almost take that for granted. I don't think that a company that's not really participating in open sourcing right now has a fair chance of leveraging that as well. And it's also the right and fair thing to do. If you're a user of science, if you take from others, you're advancing it, you have to give back as well. Obviously data, that's I think is the real lifeline, and releasing code without releasing data is usually what creates that barrier to entry for most new startup companies, researchers that may want to try out new things. I completely understand the concerns around doing that, both from a competition perspective, I get it, from an IP perspective, from a privacy perspective as well for involved parties. But it is one thing that I think we need to keep our eyes on and find meaningful solutions, because if data lies with the hands of a few companies, usually the businesses that have been around in business for a long time, platform companies, we will never have a self-fulfilling ecosystem unless these acquisitions happen of like, oh, you got a pocket of smart people there, just go buy them in, rather than giving them the means to go develop what they could on their own as well, and advance other business agendas as well, because not everything has to be about financial services or entertainment or advertising, whatever if you made the top 10 players in AI are working on right now. more work needs to be done by smaller groups in other directions as well. And talent, which I think it's a bit of a contentious point, but there are a few people that really do machine learning on the tech side, and we're not at a state where we have practitioners of AI at scale yet. These few people are concentrated within a handful of companies, and that's the reality where we are today. So what is being advanced, what business agenda is being advanced really for humanity if we have people focusing on 5 areas, right? That's very limiting.
I'd like to add to the democratization of AI. So I have 14 years of post-grad academic background myself, but I don't believe that AI should only be accessible for individuals with academic training. It's really crucial to democratize AI, especially for domain experts, whether through open sourcing and releasing libraries or through creating out-of-the-box tools and platforms. I can give you an example at Microsoft is Azure Machine Learning AutoML, which is a drag and drop, easy to use platform for AI enthusiasts. So you don't really have to write a single line of code to be able to build an AI solution. And I strongly believe that information or source reporting has no place in today's or future's AI activities, and especially now that you find many multidisciplinary initiatives that are creating incredible AI solutions with minimum academic background, but great exposure to their specific domains, pain points, and challenges that they're trying to solve.
Good. So interfaces to the code, also data, the democratization of data. Good. Nicole, do you have anything to say about the democratization of AI?
This is a trickier one for me. I come from industry, and I can see why it's important for companies with data who are building solutions to create a competitive advantage. That makes a challenge for them to just allow that to become open source. I do think that we certainly have the opportunity to do that in a way that doesn't damage the company that's working towards the solution, but also benefits others. And if that's maybe just creating a solution that can be used by other people, not necessarily releasing the model or the data, I think that's another way of doing it as well. If companies don't see an advantage to working on this, it is just going to be the big companies doing this. The small to mid-sized companies, they have the data to do this. But if they will see no advantage to doing it, they won't do it. So, you have to kind of play both sides to that.
Good. That's good. So what are the barriers to entry for these small to medium companies? What stops them from getting AI integrated?
There's a few things. A lot of them first will employ 1, 2, 3 data scientists and say, do some AI. But that doesn't work out because AI can't just be done by a data scientist. There needs to be project management. There needs to be software development. There's all of these stages to employing, some sort of solution. So that's one big part. Some companies approach the universities to work with them, but the university's focus is research. And so that will take them so far. And then the company is left again without a solution to integrate. Plus, I think the last point of where it's difficult for them is the lack of education in this area. So many company owners know they need to get into machine learning and AI, but they have no idea how. They're nervous about it because it's outside their comfort zone. They're running a traditional industry. Tech is not their focus, and it's scary. They know how to do it. They know they need to, but it's terrifying. If you're, 10 years from retirement and you've run a great business for a long time, I'm not sure when something seems a little scary, that might not be the time you jump at it. So, it's really about educating all industries and entrepreneurs and owners of companies to see what they could do. And that if they work with people who can help them do that, it's not so difficult.
Alona, can I add just a little something? Because democratization can be understood from a very technical perspective, but from my perspective, it's really more about making it, so going through the entire process of funding education programs on what AI is and what the ethical and social implications are, doing the outreach work to speak with the organizations. If we look at the Canadian AI ecosystem, 95% of the applications are in the for-profit sector. The government is even more nervous than the people 10 years away from retirement. Politicians are extremely scared and misunderstand sometimes some of the concepts around data governance, afraid to explore in how we could improve trust by involving, engaging civil society organizations a lot more. So I think to be able to really democratize AI, and not just the technical development, but also its governance, because if you look at globally the governance of AI, right now there's out of 84 documents that were found, the 1.2% were done by academic and independent organizations or labor organizations to determine which values should be integrated into ethical frameworks. So not only from the technical development side, but also from the governance aspect, we cannot have what I perceive as a democratization of AI until that level of understanding has reached civil society organizations, and until that capacity in being able to participate in the development of those ethical frameworks, which eventually become law. So it's really, allowing them to be able to participate in those discussions. Same thing with the arts and cultural sector, the IP laws right now. AI is applying for IP in the UK and China and the US. I think there's 3 different cases. How can AI apply for IP? AI is owned by a private company. How could that support innovation? Do we want to continue supporting innovation, both as a business sector and a cultural sector, which is very often nonprofit? So I think those are also important questions to ask ourselves when we're thinking about AI democratization. And I put a couple links in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. So what is the role of government? What should governments be doing that they're not doing? What is Canada already doing?
I know Canada's doing, well, there's a global partnership on AI, which I can't wait to hear a little bit more about. I think that's, for me, still a little bit of a mystery. But that's 7 or 8 countries, from what I understand, coming together, and they just did their first call for projects. So we'll be looking at that. The idea is to orient that as AI being used as a tool for social good, which is fantastic. The recommendations, there's 8 recommendations that I presented at the Alan Turing Institute recently at the UN, and again tomorrow as part of another event. I don't remember all by heart, but I can if you want me to. I think we talked about it a little bit in our prep chat, and I think everybody agreed with the fact that AI and AI ethics actually, but it's easier to understand for AI ethics. AI needs to be understood as a multidisciplinary discipline that includes the arts and humanities. And that will change team composition on the ground. That will change funding programs. So number 1, my recommendation is that. Same thing with a definition of AI ethics. Not as like, okay, we've got some guidelines now and we can sit back and relax and adopt some laws and relax. That's not true, because 3/4 of the population is not on board yet. So adopt a definition of AI ethics that is alive and can grow as we onboard more people into this discussion. Fund civil society organizations, access, create a pan-Canadian network of CSOs who can share tools of knowledge and understanding around AI outside of data philanthropy projects and AI philanthropy projects. So that's number 3, and there's 5 more, so I won't bore everybody out. There's 5 more on the, which touches on IP strategies, extremely important to look at, monitoring, valuing social impact of AI once implemented, look into data governance, into data trusts, and start to allow society, like organizations, to test how that would work for them. There's the First Nations data governance initiative in BC, which is really interesting to follow. They are, the entire objective of that organization is to gather data and make it work for their community.
anybody want to add or comment about that?
I think industry actually needs to lead what government should do. So many times I've been in on discussions, and what I'm hearing is we don't know necessarily what to do, and we need direction. I feel like within Canada, the government wants to hear from us. They want to listen, and they want to, have us lead what the possibilities are and what direction they should be taking. For our company, AltaML, we have joined AI Global, which to be a member, you have to demonstrate that you are using AI in a responsible way. So they are really pushing for the design and for AI to be regulated worldwide in a consistent way. If all of the companies doing AI in Canada became AI Global members, that would help direct the government on where we need to be, because AI Global can take that stance, because you can't do it country by country. We can't have Canada regulating AI in one way, the United States doing it in another, China doing it in their way. We need to work towards a global plan. And I feel like organizations like AI Global can take that lead, but they need industry to join them and be part of it.
So it might feel like if you're just working for a company, maybe you're not high up in the executive, that you can't have an impact on these sorts of things. So Helia, how do you think that people can impact the direction of their company from the inside and make sure that ethical AI is taken?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want, before answering that question, I want to mention that back to Nicole's point, it's really important to have a standard for ethical AI solutions. Microsoft took an initiative. We have teams dedicated to building ethical AI. There's really 6 major areas like fairness. AI systems should treat all people fairly, reliability and safety. AI solutions have to be reliable and safe. They should consider harm, especially for humans. Security and privacy, it has to be secure and respect privacy of not only the users, but also the source of the data that you gather through the purpose of data acquisition, all the way to training and deploying your models. There are areas on inclusiveness. It has to empower everyone and engage people regardless of our abilities. Around transparency, AI systems should be understandable. And I think it's a big topic. I can't crack it in a few minutes, but there's really a trade-off between performance and transparent machine learning models. And finally, accountability. People should be accountable for the AI systems. There should be a way around correcting machine errors based on the human expert knowledge. And back to Valentine's point, we have to study the social impact of AI systems or emotional impact of using AI system. And we have teams at Microsoft, as I mentioned, that we are focusing on each of these areas. And before starting any AI projects with our customers and partners, we need to scope and probe whether or not these solutions are AI, ethical AI. Back to your question around, how can people within the industries impact AI for good? My biggest advice for people in the field of AI is, diversity. Not only diversity in their data, but also in the teams developing and testing the AI solutions. You need to have multiple lens and angles, both in the research domain and the business and development workflows. And you really need to think outside of your role and responsibilities. Not just in AI, but really in any field you're in, to find ways to reduce or eliminate bias. You need to think about inclusivity from the very early stage of designing your AI solution, and answer questions like, who will be the end user? Does the solution include every person, regardless of their ethnicity, background, gender, ability, level of education, time of the month, time of the week, whether they're tired, they're under pressure, and many more questions. You need to educate yourself and your peers on any discriminating use of AI, and have an open mindset to accept and that these challenges exist, and what it is that you can do to solve and reduce these challenges.
I can chime in. I think it's ironic to a certain extent that you can work as, say, a developer in a really big company, and you may feel powerless in affecting the direction of that company or how the stuff you build gets used. But it's ironic because the information of how that can be misused lies with that developer. There is no company, I think, that has nailed completely governance at a level that understands AI so deeply, that has controls in place. We have high-level principles, sure. Do no harm. We've heard things like that, but what does that really mean? Who defines them? What is that harm? How can it look? That only the person, the inventor, the builder, the people that put it together can actually raise those concerns and make everyone else aware about them. So creating processes where people can speak up in these companies, transparency as to how you're intending to use the technologies that are being built are so important. Like we look around in our centers at RBC and we ask people to, you own that. You are responsible for letting us know, letting the business know what can go wrong with the technologies that we're building. Because way too often we've seen, and I think it's devastating sometimes, enterprises putting out AI, then realizing that, I didn't expect that, pulling products back. I mean, I'm glad to see products being pulled back, but it's not okay to not expect things. And usually if you ask around in a company, the people that built this out, they probably were expecting it. They knew, they were aware of the risks. It's just that they didn't have the platform, perhaps, to always speak about that.
In our company, we often refer to, there are two types of people. There are managers and there are leaders. Managers look at their job description. They do exactly what they were signed up to do, and they do it well. Leaders are ones who look outside of their job description. They identify problems and they propose solutions. In most companies, I believe that people who do propose solutions outside of their job description, they get listened to. They become the go-to people, and they really can make change. Within our organization, you know, when the BIPOC movement came out, right away our team started coming up with ideas and brought forward solutions. You know, so we've now instituted an AI governance committee that as soon as a project begins, you know, at a certain phase, it stops until everything's passed through that committee. That was not brought forward by myself or my co-founder. It was brought forward by our team. So everybody, no matter what level, can look for those problems and propose solutions.
I love that, leading versus managing. That's an excellent way to put it. One thing we talked about, maybe to build on this, is that AI was born in a very multidisciplinary environment. It was you know, psychologists, computer scientists, statisticians, philosophers all working together to understand the nature of intelligence. And it's become an extremely technical field, but I think it's important to remember that people from all kinds of backgrounds can have an impact on AI and can participate in the AI ecosystem. So I was wondering if any of you wanted to talk about how people with different backgrounds can play a role in AI's success.
Yeah.
If you don't code, what do you do?
I can take this one. So
sorry, go ahead.
This is an undeniable point. You can play a great role even when you're coming from a very different background compared to your team. You know, we need individuals from different backgrounds, not only for their domain expertise, but also as fresh new pair of eyes. You know, sometimes when you've performed a task numerous times, you automatically opt for ways that worked before, and you really fail to think outside of the box. And having a team member from a different background will give the team a new perspective. An example would be really any applied AI workloads, such as assistive tools for rare disease or predictive models in tomography screenings. And you know, when you have the domain knowledge, you can start with open source solutions, out of the box tools to design your systems. In some cases, without even writing a single line of code in your, don't let lack of coding experience or computer or data science background come in your way of solving real world problems that you can easily identify as a human specialist.
Yeah, if I can, I always like to bring up this example. The CAIS Center at University of Southern California brought together two faculties, engineering and social work. And all the projects that they develop at the CAIS Center are developed in collaboration with social workers who work in community-based organizations. The type of projects that come out of that center are stellar. I can't not name one single project that came out of that center that is not one of the examples that I use in my conferences around the use of AI for social good. It is a recipe. Multidisciplinarity is actually a complete recipe, first of all, to having more diversity instantly within your team, because the engineering faculty had not enough women, social work had not enough men, and by bringing the two together, they had gender balanced teams. And community-based organizations tend to have 7 to 8 out of 10 workers generally are also women, new citizens to the country, so either Canada or whatever country, so new immigrants, older people. There's more diversity, youth, their first job. So these type of organizations generally are very diverse, diverse backgrounds. And so just going back to the multidisciplinary aspect, I thought it was a complete recipe for making excellent AI projects, because they have that social engineering solution and AI engineering solution, and the two together. Just to give a couple of examples, in LA, there was a huge homeless there still is a huge homeless, probably bigger now with COVID, sorry, homeless population. And they had AIDS propagation problem. So AI identified the leaders, speaking of leadership within the homeless community, better than humans. Humans choose a popular person. AI went through, the questions were developed by that multidisciplinary team, multi-sectoral team, and identifying the right questions to ask. So it was human-led, of course, but the AI identified with much better success who would would disperse information better within the community. So there's, I think we make better AI, better quality AI, also by integrating multidisciplinary perspectives. Also from experience, when I go in with my lawyer hat into developing an AI solution using NLP, I'll be more alert to words such as should, shall. If you're being asked to eliminate or identify those words, you don't necessarily realize what the legal implications are of identifying those words. So it's absolutely essential and necessary to have teams that are more and more multidisciplinary. And I agree with Foteini when she was talking about earlier. I think sometimes within the organizations, even within business, there's not enough support for and I commend you, Nicole, on what you're doing with your organization, because these AI governance or AI ethics teams sometimes are put in place a little bit on the fly without much support, no corporate training being paid to support that. So in the business world, I think that's extremely important to take into consideration.
For myself, if you'd asked me 3 years ago if I would be in AI, I would have laughed at you. My background was in real estate and online media, nothing to do with AI. And so I feel like I'm an example, as well as so many people in our company, that AI is not just about being a data scientist. And if you bring a lot of diverse backgrounds together, you can create a better company, a better solution. I mean, we have project managers, product managers, business development, software developers, and a CEO who knew nothing about AI 3 years ago. But everybody in our company, I would consider working in AI. So, it's not just the data scientist who's working on that model. They're working in a team and bringing diverse backgrounds. Many people who are data scientists, because it's such a new career, were something else before they were a data scientist. And as we talk to different companies and we work together to form use cases and look for potential models that would create ROI for those companies, it really helps if someone has a background similar to that company. So we always try to hire people with very diverse backgrounds, because if you go into an insurance company and work with them on a solution, if somebody worked in the insurance company previous, that's a huge advantage.
I would echo that. And I think it's a no-brainer, honestly, that these teams are interdisciplinary. AI, like I said earlier, is a tool. It has to be applied to solve a world problem. If you only employ the people that know how to build the tool and not the ones that can problem solve for the world, I just don't know. First of all, economically, it doesn't make sense. This is not how we build products. I very rarely have seen products built out of just tech teams that didn't have expertise in any other area be quite successful. You need that experience. And because you can take AI into fashion, into healthcare, into education, financial services, you need experts from all of these areas to adapt it to that domain and make it successful for the user. Otherwise, you're just building tech for the sake of tech. Like it's not a product.
Good. So maybe a question from the audience that I just saw roll by. Does anybody have advice for people who are just starting out in AI? Maybe switching fields or new careers?
The opportunity once of meeting Richard Branson. And what he told me is, when the opportunity arises, say yes, figure out how to do it later. That's what I did with my company. I said yes, and then I started learning about AI. And so that would be, I guess, my biggest piece of advice. Just say yes.
I think for me, my piece of advice would be create a community around yourself. I went to a conference, the Startup Festival, and I'd already started reading a little bit, but I got really excited about the different potential applications AI could have. And I decided to create a startup, a meetup group. And I was asking specific questions that were bothering me. And I reached out to Yoshua Bengio, who is one of the pioneers and award-winning researcher in deep learning. I did not let myself be intimidated by that. So maybe that might be my second piece of advice. Don't be scared. Reach out to people and create a community around you. I was concerned that all the potential exciting applications I was seeing with AI had no funding sources for them. And I created an organization, and I started working around that, and I still am. So say yes, embrace that excitement. If you're angry about bias, embrace that anger. It's fine. There is bias, and there's a lot of work to do, and reach out and create people to find any other way that you have around you to be able to engage with people who share those concerns, questions, excitement, and reach out to leaders and who can help you out and give you advice.
Maybe I can add, these are great, these are fantastic points. Maybe I can add a few more. I would say only compare yourself with your past. There are many incredible individuals that should inspire you and not intimidate you and not scare you that you will never be like them because you're starting late. Start with something that's important to you, something that you're passionate about. Even if you can't find an important problem, because I have often talked to women that are starting their journey and they ask me, I don't have something that I'm passionate about, but I want to learn AI, I want to learn data science. I always tell them, try to find a small project that was even previously solved multiple times and work on it. You may end up finding a better solution than the previous ones. If not, you will learn how to solve a problem at the very least. And then compare your skill sets with when you started the project. My other piece of advice would be is always break big problems into smaller tasks or sub-projects, and always crawl before you walk and before you run.
My 2 cents, I don't think there is anything more intimidating about the AI community than other communities. So it will take guts to come in if you're an outsider into any new community, whether that is you entering the financial services world or healthcare world, whatever that may be. If anything, I would say it is a very collaborative community. It's open and it's very intellectual. And the advantage that you get out of that is that it always wants to learn and it's fascinated by expertise. So they would trade their knowledge for what you bring in. And they will very happily do that. And that may feel welcoming.
Good, lots of awesome tips there. We're a little low on time, but I wanted to, in the interest of openness and honesty, see if anybody wanted to tell us about a time they failed and what they did to pick themselves back up.
How many do you want?
Maybe one to start.
I can go first. I honestly got plenty. I will pick one from the beginning of my career. Transitioning from academia to the industry was something that was really, really tough on me. I was also very concerned about my ability to do that. So because of my accent, my English wasn't great. And what if people say words that I don't understand? And how would I answer? And then I only know how to do research. Am I supposed to be running a company and all that? And I projected all that fear. Everyone could smell it, see it. So rejections that came along while I was raising money just because of me projecting lack of confidence, because I was just a PhD and that was somehow not enough because I was just a woman engineer. It was something that I had to deal with as I was starting out. Keep going, and after this, after you get rejected again and again and again, especially in the process of raising funding, it was challenging. But it's something that just I kept to it because I had fallen in love with what I was building, and I thought that I could find a soul out there that would believe in it as well. And eventually it happened. And then I realized there's more like that out there. It's just that people will flat out reject you. And if you're scared as well, just to begin with, then that may actually happen a bit more often.
You can go next. I can share my own experience, but it's rather a misfortunate event and a challenge along my way than a failure. I lost my dear supervisor when I was finishing my PhD studies, and I not only lost a great mentor, and Foteini knows that supervisor that I'm talking about. Not only losing that great mentor, but also I had to extend my research time. It's a devastating period for any PhD student, and instead of giving up, I joined an amazing research group, and I learned so much from my incredible supervisor and the teammates during the extra 3 years that I was working on a very new research topic. And looking back, I faced many challenges, but one thing is for sure that I only remember the valuable lessons and the outcome, and I don't remember the pain of the change or the challenges. So, you will fail multiple times. You will feel like giving up, but you got to push even harder and reach out to your peers, ask for advice, take a short time off, find whatever it is that keeps you moving forward, and only focus on your end goal.
One of the things that we do at AltaML is, we believe that mistakes should be valued. Every Friday we give out a monkey, and everybody talks about the different mistakes they've made that week and the learnings that they've had that came from that, so that they can be shared. Because our belief is that if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying new things, and you're not pushing yourself to be the best you can be. For myself, a mistake I made that I can share is that I took the perception that, I have a co-founder, he's male. My way of gaining respect was to work really, really hard, and everyone would then respect me for the value I brought. I didn't demand the respect that I deserved. And so it became known that AltaML was Corey's company. No one knew that Nicole existed. And I was sort of seen as someone who just happened to be on the letterhead. And so recently we changed my title because I finally said, enough's enough. This is my thing to change. This has nothing to do with anyone else. We changed my title to be more representative of the role that I'm playing. I'm doing things like speaking on panels at AI Global. I am, I've joined a board recently, a board of directors. So, it was on me to make that change. And so that was a learning for me for sure.
I could name so many mistakes. It's not funny. And while I was doing my workout today, I was trying to think, okay, which one do I choose that's like meaningful? And I'm not going to name that one in the end, because I think what I'd like to finish on is our government needs to be able to make mistakes. And I think if we want to be able to trust new technology, which is low in Canada, if we want to be able to trust Canada and digital governance in Canada, there are ways that we can create sandboxes around an area, a legal zone where you're allowed to test things out, like data trusts or social impact evaluation models. And I think there would be more trust if, again, the government involved more community-based organizations, civil society organizations who have the right expertise, of course, and right aligned mission with that. But that was recommended by a huge panel of experts already 2 years ago to the Canadian government around social economy initiatives and adoption of SDGs. I'm saying it now in the context of AI and proper data and AI governance. So mistakes are part of our success. And I think if our government can breathe, relax, support civil society organizations, we're going to have more trust and more space to make mistakes that will lead to successful and inclusive innovation in Canada.
Valentine, can I jump in? Do we have a moment?
Yeah.
This was a really interesting point. Do you think though that as
we're done?
No,
okay, we're chatting. Okay,
no,
I just took a Alona's role here, and I'm just going to go on with the panel.
Go ahead.
Do you think that our people are open to that failure, though? Like, because the government may be interested in taking certain risks, but are Canadians forgiving? And do we move on and try again? Because I have this fear that it's not in our DNA to fail as a country in such risky things.
Well, that's the area that I work in, day out. So last year, for example, we presented a project to the Quebec Ministry of Economy and Innovation. There were 13 partners behind that project, including Mila, Shum, Pingwak, organizations in north of Quebec, accountant professional organizations, the legal bar in Quebec. There were 13 organizations across the province supporting this project, which basically was creating with these civil society organizations who work both in social economy, in tech transfer. So working with them to be able to put in place 3 pilot projects. That's all we wanted. We wanted $200K to make 3 pilot projects that these organizations could come around with the support of Mila and this entire expert community to choose a project and to say, what do I find acceptable? What do I not find acceptable? And all the new recent learning research and social innovation research goes in that direction. So I really believe that this is the way to go, because we can, I think also very reassuring for the business sector, because you're right away going to get a very direct answer is like, no, citizens don't want this. It's not acceptable. I think if that kind of work was done and was supported, we would have, first of all, we're closing the digital literacy gap that exists right now in that sector. We would have a more responsible adoption of technology. And yeah, no, I mean, thank you for asking that questions, because I have at least 3 projects on the table, including the Art Impact AI that we'll be launching the report of tomorrow. I put the link, everybody, feel free to join. I think those are the kind of projects. That's the process of closing the gap is not an immediate one, and building trust is not something that you can impose on people. It's really through the process of understanding how it's used, what it can be used for, what the organizations can benefit from. Like, can they be more efficient? We co-published also with an observatory on social inequalities, as well as Centraide, which is United Way Montreal, like in Quebec, basically. And with all the statistics around, you know, how many women are in these organizations and how these organizations, how they could benefit and how they don't have access to that. And we submitted that again with that application, and it was turned down to everybody's complete surprise.
I agree, and I think inclusiveness indeed may be the answer to this. I agree with you, but I also feel like culturally we need to think about our upping our game here a bit and getting comfortable with that failure that may come with things like you talked about, data trusts, stuff like that haven't really been successful anywhere in the world yet, could be of an immense value if we tried them out in Canada. We just have a culture of looking back in our history and pointing way too often. Ooh, remember when we tried this and it didn't work? Don't ever do that again. Don't ever do that again. And we've got a lot of history like that in the Canadian industry that we just have to just get over it, move on, try again. Sorry.
Yes. Actually, just going back to the contact tracing apps, this kind of like up and down in Canada right now.
Good. I just wanted to encourage people to ask questions. We've had a few come in, and we'll go through them in a minute, but ask questions on the chat and I'll try to incorporate them into the conversation. But I actually just wanted to allow you guys a little bit more time. If anybody had questions for each other, now would be a great time.
Well, I saw a question earlier on the slide around projects with the Global South or Latin America. That was like way earlier. Did anybody have anything? Like, I have a project that we're working on with Chile, but I'll be announcing that very soon, so you can stay tuned on social media until we're allowed to announce it. But how about everybody else? Where are the clients? Are the clients somewhere? Maybe that's a nice, interesting topic to talk about. Where are you selling the AI product?
For us, we are working with companies mostly in America. We are exploring one opportunity in South America currently, but that's not signed. There are challenges for us about divulging too much, because obviously many companies don't want other companies, their competitors, to know that they are working on these types of solutions. But you know, we're working across all of the major industries, primarily in Canada, but also in the US.
Oh, and just very quickly, just because I didn't have my green screen today, I can tell you a little bit about the AI that I use in my art projects. I don't know if there's any artists here who are listening, but I use text-to-image interpretation, and all the workshops that I did across Canada, I use that text and put it in a really easy-to-use runway ML application. So I input the text and interprets that into an image and then I play around with that image. But sometimes it's extremely interesting, because if I put in, for example, just testing things, women, beauty, imperfection, I will get a pear-shaped abstract painting. So I encourage creative minds to go explore how you can use AI in your projects. It can relate even to AI ethical issues, or just be a lot of fun to use as well.
Maybe Nicole, you can comment on, sorry, this was just a follow-up to something you said earlier. Can you comment a little bit on how a company can be aligned with ethical AI, but still be profitable? Like, how can those two things coexist?
Why can they not?
Good.
Sorry, were you about to jump in? But I just didn't find them contradicting in any way. If anything, I think you want to have a happy client, a trusted relationship with your clients, that you can only take this many chances with them. So you might as well invest early on in building these into your designs, into your product designs, rather than alienate your clients. Happy client will take you anywhere as a business.
You know, I agree with that. I feel like for-profit business sometimes gets a bad reputation. It's considered evil, and then not-for-profit, you know, is this wonderful world, but not-for-profit is not always virtuous. There are governments around the world that plan to use AI for not such good things. And, you know, we're profitable. You know, that's our purpose. We desire to make money in what we do. But our company purpose is to apply AI to elevate human potential. And we live that. We would not work with a client that would be looking to use the solution in a way that doesn't align with our purpose. But so far, we haven't had to turn down one company that has approached us. So that sort of gives you perspective on that. You know, we work with industries that have really bad public perception. The energy sector has a very bad perception and reputation across Canada. I mean, worldwide, really. But the projects that we're working on there, you know, we're working on reduction of greenhouse gases, and we're working on, you know, there's an oil and gas plant that they have to use a particular type of fireproofing insulation that often they have safety issues with, because as it ages, it falls from the walls and the ceiling, and it's caused significant, you know, worker injuries. And we're working with them through 3D scans to identify when certain panels need repair. So the focus on these projects is not simply, you know, how can we, you know, use this for evil and make some secret robot that's going to eliminate all of our jobs. They're really looking for things like worker safety and sustainability and, you know, preventative maintenance and all of those things that, you know, make them a better company to work for and, you know, within our communities. So can a profitable company, you know, use AI in an ethical way? Absolutely, it can.
I just put in the notes on the side as well that NeurIPS is one of the oldest, most prestigious AI conferences worldwide. And in 2020, it was growing. It was so huge. In 2018, organizing the AI for Social Good panel, and we could barely get tickets ourselves. I think they sold 12,000 tickets in 8 minutes or something. And they decided this year that social impact assessments of all research being submitted, as well as financial conflict of interest declaration, if there was any. So for sure, there are ways that business can be ethical in their use of AI, as well as contribute to positive social impact.
Maybe I can give a healthcare lens to ethical AI. In healthcare organizations, there are many subdivisions that can benefit from AI, ranging from IT and operational optimization teams all the way to groups working on better clinical outcomes, patient care, care teams coordination, healthcare professional collaboration. In some areas may directly be influenced by AI and be critical, like clinical analysis or decision support. When you're designing an adverse event detection or an early warning system like code blue prediction, you're dealing with patients going through a life and death scenario. You want not only your data to be inclusive and without bias, but at the same time, you want to build transparent machine learning models that can identify reasons behind calling a cardiac event, for example. So you also want like a feedback system to allow AI models for corrections when, for example, the algorithm fails, and designing an error corrections, false positives and false negatives, for instance, would facilitate the retraining of the machine learning models and may prevent or maybe lower potential risk of harm. And now going back, you know, to the role in assisting people during a pandemic, for example. So it's not so much about profitability, but what are the roles of AI in people's lives during pandemics. I believe 2020 was the year of applied AI and digital transformation, especially across the healthcare spectrum. Many great solutions and tools were designed or repurposed to aid the healthcare providers or frontline workers or patients and caregivers. An example would be the self-screening solutions, leveraging natural language processing, AI agents or chatbots can now easily deploy or deliver information and eliminate bottlenecks. In crisis like this pandemic, it's not only important to medical care, but also provide information to help people who are making the decisions while keeping safe and prevent health systems from being overwhelmed. We have developed a healthcare bot service with healthcare organizations who are on the front line of the COVID-19 response to help screen patients for potential infection and care. So we might be selling these solutions, but it's putting towards good use. Saving frontline workers from having close contact with patients. So you're actually are able to combine augmented reality with AI solutions to basically provide a means for the healthcare worker to remotely or within a distance monitor their patients. And this bot, for example, is able to quickly assess the symptoms and risk factors for people worried about infection and provide information to suggest the next course of actions. Another area would be around wearing masks properly, monitoring people who are wearing the mask or not wearing them. Basically are following social distancing guidelines if they are within a 6 feet distance between the next patient. These are the type of algorithms that can really help individuals during pandemics. So I just want to point out that we often talk about AI applications and performance of the machine learning algorithm, but often we forget that the data is residing in silos. So just wanted to point out that when we tend to think about these solutions, we overlook the importance of data acquisition and data ingestion. Having data silos and fragmented data sources can, if we bring those together, can provide very valuable information. In addition to direct applications of AI, there are, of course, other AI-infused technologies and platforms that can build data consolidations and standards to enable, for example, researchers to have access to homogenized genomic data to analyze and discover and share their research findings. And these solutions can empower researchers and data scientists to understand COVID-19 and to accelerate diagnosis and treatments.
For-profit private sector, there's a lot of applications of AI that are very positive for society. And both Nicole, Helia, you guys mentioned many of them. But the reality is also that for every application that the private sector can put out that moves society forward, they can also put something out that moves it backward. And really the question is on the contentious things. So take something like advertising, for example, which is a very profitable business for many companies. And you start bringing AI to that. So then you have a choice. You can invest in building those applications ethically, or you can go by, leverage the tools that exist out there, quick and dirty, put it together, throw it out in the wild, and start seeing that uptick in customer acquisition or whatever. So I think that's where really the conversation is about, right? Like when it comes to these there's applications where harm can happen, because there's others, of course, where harm cannot happen, and there's only positive outcomes. So on the latter, then I would say, I cannot see a world where there is sustainable competitive advantage to a business that chose to move society backward. I think there's a short-term lived advantage there, where you may get an uptick of a couple of percentages with your clients, but in the long run, society always gets to understand, wrap their head around the advantages or disadvantages of what they're using. And people will always choose to buy from companies that serve them better and respect them better. So it may be expensive. It absolutely is expensive to be investing in ethical AI. It will slow you down to take a few products to market, but it's worthwhile for sure. And gladly, from what I've seen, most companies actually adhere to such standards. There's very few that have this move fast, break things kind of attitude, but I don't see any lasting value there created.
So maybe I'll take one of the questions from the audience and maybe broaden it a bit. So the question is about, are there regulatory changes you would make or that are on your wish list to improve the AI landscape? But I talked, maybe make it more general and just what should the government be doing to assist the development of AI? So either regulations or something else.
For one example I have is, so in Alberta, we have a single payer system for health, and we have a very diverse population. So the data that resides within our province is really world-class to be able to build machine learning, solutions around that could really change the face of the health industry. The problem is that access to that data, is so restrictive. We've been working, since our company started 2.5 years ago on trying to this point, even offer our services for free to try and help move that forward, because, this benefits us as a society, not just, as a province or a country, but as an entire society. We have the potential of solving diabetes and, identifying, risk factors for different diseases, all because this data resides here. But we need the regulators to let people who, the researchers and the companies looking to commercialize get access to that data in a way that, obviously is anonymized, et cetera. But it seems to me like it feels scary to them. It's unknown, and so they just say no instead of exploring it and looking, for possible solutions.
Nicole, that's fantastic.
So if I can hop into what Nicole.
Go ahead, Valentine.
Should I? Okay, sorry. Should I have on, or am I delayed, or everything's good?
Sorry, Valentine.
I was just going to hop on to what Nicole was saying and talk about trust. I don't think that change is going to happen until we address where the lack of trust is coming from. And I'm going to stay really short and just mention that the government needs to focus on where the lack of trust is coming from in terms of development and governance, because the governance also in a loop will support improved trust in AI, onboarding and use and commercialization will ultimately help our economy develop positively and support our economic recovery strategies.
I'd like to add to Nicole's point, and that's a great point to raise. I believe it's lack of around security and privacy. There are algorithms that can help with the identification of the data, or encryption that can encrypt your data, but it's really lack of education and knowledge around, especially around cloud and AI on cloud, for example. So the fear that if you put your data on cloud, or if you put your data, open your data to an organization to come and build an AI model on top of it, you're going to increase the risks. So I believe we need to do a better work in educating, in my case, healthcare organizations around security and privacy, of sharing the data, how they can share their data. First step, de-identify, for example, on their servers, on their environment, and sharing that de-identified data to open doors to great research, like the one Nicole mentioned. I mean, there are so many applications that I can think about and I can talk about in healthcare, when not only bringing the data silos together, but also providing that in a shared platform. We are working as part of the Super Cluster Initiative to build a national data sharing platform for researchers to get access to genomics data. We have great partners that are building these data sharing platforms to provide this to the researchers for free to start building their applications on top of it. So I think that's lack of education and the fear, and we have to do better work at demystifying that cloud or AI is going to access your data, is going to increase the risk of data breach, for example.
Sorry, I just want to jump in and say we only have a minute left, and I think we get cut off when our time is up. Sorry, Foteini. I wanted to just say that we had such a great sort of scope of things we talked about today. Thank you all for being so interactive. Thank you to the audience for the wonderful questions. I think this was a fantastic conversation. I'm so happy to have been a part of it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.